Breaking news, a whole lot going on all of a sudden inside the closing arguments in the defamation damages trial against Donald Trump. Trump walked into the courtroom late. He walked out when the plaintiffs were delivering their closing arguments. At one point, the judge had to warn defense lawyers they were close to being thrown in the lockup. Let's get right to CNN's Kara Scannell, who ran out from inside that courtroom to give us an explanation of what was going on. Kara?
Yeah, John, an eventful day this morning, to say the least, that had nothing to do with even the closing arguments. So it began, as you say, when Donald Trump's team was already late, which the judge noted when he took the bench. Then Donald Trump did enter the courtroom, and they were arguing still before the jury even got in there about a slide that the Trump's team wanted to use in their presentation. And Carol's lawyer said it included things that were not in evidence in the case. The judge said it was out. That's when Trump's attorney, Ali Bahaba, stood up to challenge the judge on his ruling. He's made it very clear throughout this trial, when he rules, and that's it. She started to challenge him. He had hit his limit and said, "You are on the verge of spending some time in the lockup. Now sit down."
What's happening, friends? Welcome to Jack Mockler. Right now, federal judges are now warning Trump's attorneys that the next time they step out of line, they'll go to jail. Not fines or warnings, but handcuffs and a holding cell. This stunning confrontation between the judiciary and a former president's legal team is unfolding in real time across multiple courtrooms. Let me set the scene for you, because the atmosphere in these courtrooms has become absolutely electric. For years, Trump's legal strategy has followed a predictable pattern: push every boundary, test every limit, file every conceivable motion regardless of merit, make inflammatory statements to the press.
Now, then at this point, we were moving into closing arguments. The jury was brought in, and Carol's team started their statements by telling the jury, what this case was about, these statements that Donald Trump had made. And Carol's attorney, Roberta Kaplan, was specifically saying at this moment that Trump didn't respect the jury verdict last year, and that he hasn't even respected it. He didn't even respect it for 24 hours, because that's when he went on the CNN town hall, repeating the statements that the jury had just found to be defamatory. It was at that moment that Trump got up from his seat, just stood up, turned, and walked out of the courtroom abruptly. That moment, the judge interrupted Carol's attorney, saying for the record, for the court reporter to say that Donald Trump had just got up and left the courtroom. And then Carol's lawyer continued doing her closing arguments. And on the closing arguments, on the merit of this case, she's reminding the jury that Trump is not above the law, that anyone should be held responsible for statements anyone else would. And so Donald Trump should also. They are asking the jury to award Carol more than $12 million in this case, John.
Did Trump ever walk back in, Kara, that you saw?
Violate gag orders, bring conspiracy theories into proceedings, turn every courtroom into a political rally. And for years, judges tolerated it. They issued warnings. They imposed small fines. They scolded attorneys and told them to behave better. But they didn't really enforce serious consequences. They didn't drop the hammer. That era is over. Now, we're watching judges collectively lose their patience. We're watching them reach a breaking point where they've decided that the normal tools of judicial discipline, fines, sanctions, referrals to bar associations, aren't working. They're not enough.
The judge in Donald Trump's federal January 6th trial is deciding whether to issue a gag order in the case. Judge Tanya Chutkan is hearing arguments today on whether to restrict Trump's comments on social media and in public. Special counsel Jack Smith has said Trump's open criticism of the prosecution and possible witnesses could have a chilling effect on the proceedings. But Trump's legal team has argued a gag order would violate his free speech rights. Political correspondent Avajoy Burnett reports on the request and the tricky balance of constitutional rights that prosecutors face.
Former President Donald Trump is accused of emboldening protesters on January 6th. Now, special counsel Jack Smith is concerned the former president will use that same influence to intimidate potential witnesses or jurors before next year's trial. Prosecutors want Judge Tanya Chutkan to issue a gag order and to take steps that will protect the identities of prospective and selected jurors after former President Trump posted statements like this: "If you go after me, I'm coming after you."
Because Trump's team has shown time and again that they don't care about fines. They fundraise off them. They wear sanctions like badges of honor. They turn every punishment into a political talking point about how the system is rigged against them. So the judges are going nuclear. Let me take you inside Judge Tanya Chutkan's courtroom for a moment because what happened there is absolutely emblematic of this broader shift. She's overseeing the federal election interference case, and she had issued a gag order, a standard legal tool designed to prevent parties from making public statements that could intimidate witnesses, prejudice potential jurors, or otherwise undermine the fair administration of justice.
Prosecutors say Trump is trying to undermine confidence in the criminal justice system and prejudice the jury pool. But Trump's attorneys say the gag order request is an unconstitutional attempt to silence President Trump's First Amendment rights to free speech ahead of the 2024 elections. His attorneys writing, if the prosecution wishes to avoid criticism for abusing its power, the solution is simple. Stop abusing its power. Former federal prosecutor David Weinstein says Judge Chutkan will have to balance Trump's free speech rights against the prosecutor's concern over potential jury and witness intimidation.
I think that this judge will look at a variety of gag orders that have been issued both in and around the district and fashion one that allows people to have free speech and then also requires them not to say something that's going to influence the outcome of this case.
Trump violated that order, not once, not twice, repeatedly. He'd go on social media. He'd hold press conferences. He'd attack prosecutors, witnesses, court staff. He'd do it with a smile, seemingly confident that nothing serious would happen. Judge Chutkan reinstated that gag order, but she didn't do it quietly. She didn't do it with a gentle reminder. She looked at the defense team and said, in language that was measured but unmistakably stern, that she would take whatever measures are necessary to safeguard the integrity of these proceedings. Whatever measures are necessary. That's judicial speak for. I don't care who your client is. I don't care what political position he holds. I don't care how many followers he has on social media. If you violate this order again, you're looking at contempt charges, and contempt can mean jail. She specifically warned against public statements targeting witnesses, prosecutors, or court staff, exactly the kind of statements Trump had been making constantly. And she made it crystal clear that the next violation would trigger consequences that couldn't be ignored, couldn't be fundraised off, couldn't be spun as a victory. Now let me take you across town to Judge Juan Merchan's courtroom in New York, where the civil fraud trial was unfolding. Same story, different judge, different case, same conclusion. Merchan had imposed fines on Trump for gag order violations, small fines at first, then larger ones. And Trump just kept violating the orders anyway. The fines weren't working. They were barely a speed bump. So Merchan did something that made every attorney in that courtroom sit up straight. He publicly threatened jail time. He said the next violation wouldn't result in another fine. It would result in actual incarceration. And here's where it gets even more intense. Merchan didn't just threaten Trump with jail. He specifically noted that anyone who helps Trump violate the gag order, including his attorneys, could face consequences too. That means if a lawyer helps craft a statement that crosses the line, if they advise Trump that it's okay to attack a witness, if they facilitate the violation in any way, they personally could be looking at a jail cell. Think about what that does to the psychology inside a legal team. Normally, attorneys have a lot of protection. Courts are reluctant to sanction lawyers too harshly because it could interfere with the attorney-client relationship and a defendant's right to counsel. But judges are now saying essentially, we understand that, we respect that, but there are limits. And if you're actively helping your client obstruct justice or violate court orders, those protections go out the window. You will face consequences. You will go to jail. This isn't happening in just one or two courtrooms. Federal judges in Washington, D.C., overseeing the Capitol riot cases, have been issuing stern contempt warnings to Trump-allied lawyers who keep trying to relitigate the 2020 election. They keep bringing conspiracy theories into courtrooms, claims about stolen elections, about false flag operations, about deep state plots. And judges are telling them, stop, this is a criminal trial about specific charges. We're not here to debate election fraud conspiracy theories. Those arguments are irrelevant, they're disruptive, and if you keep making them, you will be sanctioned. When the attorneys kept doing it anyway, because that's what Trump's legal team does, they keep pushing, Judges started hitting them with fines and threatening more serious consequences, including potential jail time for contempt, because judges view this behavior as fundamentally disrespectful to the court. It's an attempt to hijack the legal process for political purposes, to turn courtrooms into stages for political messaging rather than venues for determining guilt or innocence based on evidence and law. And the judges are saying, not in my courtroom. You want to make political arguments? Go do it on cable news. Go do it on social media. Go do it on the floor of Congress. But in my courtroom, you follow the rules of evidence and procedure. You stick to legal arguments relevant to the charges. Anything else is contempt, and contempt can mean jail. So what we're witnessing is unprecedented. Multiple judges across multiple cases, all simultaneously reaching their breaking point with Trump's legal team, all threatening jail time for attorneys who continue to disrupt proceedings, violate orders, or abuse the legal process. It's a massive escalation, and it sends a message that could not be clearer. No one is above the law. Not Trump, not his attorneys, not anyone. If you violate court orders, if you show contempt for the judicial process, you're going to jail. Period. Now let me walk you through exactly what kinds of behavior have brought us to this crisis point, because understanding the pattern helps explain why judges have finally snapped. This didn't come out of nowhere. It's been building for months, years really, and the specific conduct that's triggering these jail threats falls into several distinct categories that any practicing attorney should recognize as way outside the bounds of normal legal advocacy. First and most obvious are the gag order violations. Let me explain what a gag order actually is for anyone who might not know. When a judge issues a gag order, they're saying that the parties in a case cannot make certain public statements. Usually, these orders are designed to prevent people from intimidating witnesses, prejudicing potential jurors, or otherwise interfering with the fair administration of justice. They're not controversial. They're standard practice in high-profile cases. Every attorney knows they exist and knows they have to follow them. But Trump's team has treated gag orders like suggestions rather than commands. In case after case, Trump would go on social media or hold a press conference and directly attack people involved in the proceedings. He'd call prosecutors corrupt. He'd suggest witnesses were lying. He'd imply that court staff were part of some conspiracy against him. And his attorneys often facilitated this. They'd help craft the statements. They'd make similar statements themselves. They'd argue in court that the gag orders didn't really apply or were unconstitutional, and judges tried to handle it the normal way. They'd issue warnings. They'd say, please stop doing this. When that didn't work, they'd impose small fines. When that didn't work, they'd impose larger fines. But nothing worked because Trump's team doesn't care about fines. They pay them and move on. They fundraise off them, telling supporters that the fines prove they're being persecuted. The normal tools of judicial discipline turned out to be completely inadequate. That's why we've seen this escalation to jail threats. Judge Chutkan's reinstatement of the gag order in the federal election case is the perfect example. She didn't just say, please follow the rules this time. She said, I will take whatever measures are necessary to protect the integrity of these proceedings. And she made it clear that those measures could include contempt charges and incarceration. The next violation triggers the most serious response available. Then there's the pattern of frivolous motions and delay tactics. Trump's legal team has mastered the art of filing motion after motion after motion, not because any of those motions have legal merit, but because they're trying to slow everything down. They're trying to exhaust the patience of the court and the prosecution. They're trying to run out the clock. They file motions to dismiss on every conceivable ground. They appeal every adverse ruling, even the ones that are obviously correct. They request delays constantly. They challenge the venue. They challenge jury selection. They challenge the judge. They challenge the charges themselves. Now look, some of this is normal. Defense attorneys are supposed to explore every possible avenue for defending their client. That's zealous advocacy, and it's protected. But there's a line between zealous advocacy and abusing the legal process, and judges are increasingly concluding that Trump's attorneys have crossed that line and kept running. They're not filing these motions because they genuinely believe they have merit. They're filing them because they want to gum up the works, create chaos, and delay the inevitable for as long as possible. Judges are responding by sanctioning the attorneys, denying the motions with prejudice, and warning that continued abuse will result in more serious consequences, including contempt charges. In some cases, judges have threatened to remove attorneys from cases entirely if they keep filing frivolous motions. That's a nuclear option because it leaves the defendant scrambling to find new counsel in the middle of proceedings. Then there's the conspiracy theory problem, and this one has been particularly acute in the Capitol riot cases and the election interference case. Trump's attorneys have repeatedly tried to introduce conspiracy theories into courtroom arguments. They've claimed the 2020 election was stolen. They've claimed January 6th was a false flag operation. They've claimed deep state actors are persecuting Trump. And they're not just making these arguments in press conferences or on friendly media outlets, they're trying to make them in actual court filings and courtroom arguments. And judges have said absolutely not. This is a criminal trial. We're here to determine whether specific laws were violated. We're not here to debate conspiracy theories about stolen elections or deep state plots. Those arguments are irrelevant to the charges. They're disruptive to the proceedings. Stop making them or face sanctions. But Trump's attorneys keep pushing. They keep trying to sneak these arguments in. They keep trying to turn the trial into a referendum on the 2020 election or on political persecution. And judges are getting increasingly angry about it because it shows a fundamental disrespect for the court and the legal process. It shows attorneys who are more interested in political theater than in actually defending their client within the bounds of the law. Federal judges in D.C. have been particularly aggressive about shutting this down. They've issued contempt warnings. They've fined attorneys. They've threatened to remove attorneys from cases. And they've made it very clear that the next attorney who crosses this line is facing serious sanctions, including potential jail time for contempt. Because judges view this as an attempt to hijack the legal process for political purposes, to turn courtrooms into stages for political messaging, rather than venues for determining guilt or innocence based on evidence and law. And here's what makes all of this so significant. Judges are now threatening not just fines or professional sanctions, but actual jail time. That's a massive escalation because historically, courts have been extremely reluctant to jail attorneys for contempt. They'll impose fines. They'll issue professional sanctions. They might refer attorneys to bar associations for discipline that could take years to play out. But actually jailing an attorney during proceedings? That's rare. Very rare. Because it raises concerns about interfering with the defendant's right to counsel, and because it can have a chilling effect on zealous advocacy. But we've reached a point where judges are concluding that the normal sanctions aren't working. Fines don't matter because Trump just pays them or fundraises off them. Professional sanctions don't matter because Trump's attorneys seem to view getting sanctioned as a badge of honor that proves they're fighting the system. So, judges are going to the nuclear option. They're threatening actual incarceration because that's something that can't be ignored or spun as a victory. If you're sitting in a jail cell for contempt of court, there's no way to pretend that's a win. There's no way to fundraise off it or claim it shows you're a fighter. It's just a straightforward consequence that everyone wants to avoid. Judge Merchan's warnings in the New York case are particularly instructive here. He imposed multiple fines on Trump for gag order violations. And when those didn't work, when Trump kept violating the order anyway, Merchan said publicly that the next violation would result in jail time, not another fine. Jail. And he specifically noted that he was reluctant to take that step because jailing a defendant during trial creates logistical problems and could be seen as prejudicial. But he said if the violations continue, he'll have no choice. And he also made it clear that anyone who aids or abets the violations, which would include attorneys who help Trump craft statements that violate the order, could face consequences too. So Trump's lawyers are now in a position where they have to be extremely careful about what they help their clients say publicly. If they cross the line, they could personally go to jail for it. That's a huge change in the dynamic, and it puts enormous pressure on the legal team to rein Trump in. All of this is happening against the backdrop of multiple cases proceeding simultaneously. Trump is facing criminal charges in multiple jurisdictions, he's dealing with civil cases, he's fighting appeals, and in each of these proceedings, judges are reaching similar conclusions about his legal team's behavior. It's disruptive, it's disrespectful, it crosses the line from zealous advocacy into abuse of process, and they're all responding in similar ways: reinstating gag orders, imposing sanctions, threatening contempt charges, warning about jail time. It's like the entire judicial system has collectively decided that enough is enough, that Trump and his attorneys need to start following the same rules as everyone else, and if they won't do it voluntarily, courts will enforce compliance through the most serious sanctions available, including incarceration. Now let me step back and paint the full picture of what this all means, because the implications go far beyond just a few angry judges or a few scared attorneys. We are witnessing something genuinely historic, a moment where the judicial branch is drawing a line in the sand and saying that no amount of political pressure, no amount of public posturing, and no amount of legal gamesmanship will be allowed to undermine the integrity of American courtrooms. Think about the strategic dilemma this creates for Trump and his legal team. Their entire approach has been built on pushing boundaries and testing limits, on creating chaos and delay, on turning legal proceedings into political theater. That strategy worked for a long time because judges were patient. They gave warnings. They imposed small fines. They tried to keep proceedings moving without escalating to the most extreme sanctions. But now, judges are saying, if you keep doing that, you're going to jail. So Trump's attorneys have to make a choice. Do they continue the aggressive boundary-pushing strategy and risk going to jail themselves? Or do they pull back, follow the rules, and potentially face Trump's wrath for not fighting hard enough? It's a no-win situation. If they keep doing what they've been doing, they risk contempt charges and incarceration. If they change tactics and become more conventional, Trump might fire them and accuse them of being weak or compromised or part of the very system he claims is persecuting him. They're caught between a rock and a hard place, between angry judges threatening jail on one side and an angry client who demands maximum aggression on the other. And we're already seeing some Trump attorneys try to thread this needle, attempting to be aggressive enough to satisfy Trump, but not so aggressive that they trigger contempt charges. But that balancing act is getting harder and harder as judges lose patience and make their red lines clearer and clearer. At some point, Trump's attorneys are going to have to decide whether their loyalty to their client is worth going to jail over. And let me be honest with you about what I think is going to happen next. Based on Trump's history and personality, I don't believe he's capable of backing down. He spent his entire career in business and politics, refusing to concede, refusing to admit defeat, refusing to follow rules that he thinks don't apply to him. That pattern hasn't changed just because he's facing federal judges with the power to incarcerate. If anything, the pressure might make him double down, push harder, test the limits even more aggressively. That means we're probably going to see actual contempt charges at some point. We're probably going to see an attorney get jailed for violating a court order. We might even see Trump himself get jailed for contempt, because judges have drawn their lines, they've made their warnings, and if those warnings are ignored, they're going to follow through with enforcement. They've painted themselves into a corner where backing down now would destroy their credibility and send a message that their threats are empty. That would be historic. We've never seen a former president jailed for contempt of court during legal proceedings. We've rarely seen attorneys jailed for courtroom contempt in high-profile cases. But we might be heading toward both of those things happening because the judges overseeing these cases have made it very clear that they're prepared to take those steps if necessary. They view protecting the integrity of their courtrooms as more important than avoiding the political and media firestorm that would come from jailing Trump or his attorneys. And here's something that might surprise you. That's actually kind of reassuring in a weird way, because it shows that at least some institutions in this country are still willing to enforce rules regardless of political pressure. The judges aren't so worried about backlash that they'll allow their courtrooms to be abused. They're willing to do their jobs even when it's difficult and controversial. That's what judicial independence looks like in practice, not just in theory, but it also sets up another potential constitutional crisis. What happens if a judge orders Trump jailed for contempt and Trump refuses to comply? What if he claims the order is illegitimate and tries to use whatever remaining powers or influence he has to resist enforcement? What if his supporters take to the streets? What if the marshals have to physically remove him from a courtroom? These are scenarios that could create serious instability and conflict between branches of government, and nobody really knows how they would play out because we've never been in this situation before. Or what if Trump's attorneys get jailed and Trump claims it's political persecution and uses it to rally his supporters? That's almost certainly going to happen. He'll go on social media. He'll hold press conferences. He'll tell his followers that the system is corrupt, that the judges are part of a conspiracy, that his lawyers are martyrs for the cause. The fundraising appeals will go out within hours. The rhetoric will escalate. The attacks on the judiciary will intensify. We're in uncharted territory. The decisions made in the next few weeks and months could have profound implications for the separation of powers, the independence of the judiciary, and the rule of law in America. Because ultimately, this is about whether courts can enforce their orders against everyone, including powerful political figures and their attorneys. Whether judges have the authority to demand compliance with courtroom rules and impose sanctions, including jail time, when those rules are violated. Whether the legal system can function properly when one party is actively trying to undermine and delegitimize it. These are fundamental questions about how our system of government works, and they're being tested right now in real time in courtrooms across the country, with judges threatening jail time for Trump's attorneys, with Trump facing potential contempt charges in multiple cases, with the whole legal system being stressed in ways it's never been stressed before. Let me leave you with a final thought about what this moment really represents. What we're seeing isn't just about Donald Trump. It's not just about his attorneys. It's about whether the American legal system has the backbone to enforce its own rules against someone who has made a career out of breaking them without consequences. It's about whether judges will stand up for the integrity of their courtrooms when powerful interests try to turn those courtrooms into circuses. It's about whether the rule of law still means something in this country. For a long time, there was reason to doubt. Trump faced consequences so rarely that it seemed like he really might be untouchable. Every investigation seemed to end without charges. Every lawsuit seemed to settle or get dismissed. Every ethical violation seemed to get swept under the rug. He bragged about standing in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shooting someone without losing voters, and he wasn't entirely wrong. The normal rules didn't seem to apply to him. But the judges are saying something different now. They're saying that in their courtrooms the rules do apply. That contempt of court is contempt of court, regardless of who you are or what office you once held. That attorneys who abuse the legal process will face consequences. That gag orders mean something. That you can't turn a trial into a political rally just because you have a large platform. And they're backing up those words with the most serious threat a judge can make. Jail time. Not a fine. Not a reprimand. Not a referral to a bar association that might take years to act. Jail. As in handcuffs. As in a holding cell. As in a loss of liberty. That's either really encouraging if you believe in the rule of law, or really terrifying if you're Trump or one of his attorneys. Because the threats are real. The consequences are serious. And judges are making it very clear that they're prepared to follow through. We might be approaching a moment where someone actually goes to jail, where a judge orders Trump or one of his attorneys taken into custody for contempt. And if that happens, all bets are off in terms of what comes next. We'll be in completely uncharted constitutional territory with no clear roadmap for how to handle the fallout. The political system will be tested. The media will go into overdrive. The public will be divided. And through it all, the judges will have to stand by their decisions, enforce their orders, and defend the integrity of their courtrooms against attacks from all sides. This story is huge. Multiple federal judges threatening Trump's attorneys with jail. Gag orders being reinstated with serious enforcement mechanisms. contempt warnings being issued explicitly and publicly, the whole judicial system drawing lines and saying cross them and face immediate consequences, including incarceration. It's unprecedented. It's a massive shift in how these cases are being handled, and it signals that judges have had enough, that they're done tolerating behavior that would get anyone else held in contempt immediately, that they're prepared to enforce the rules equally regardless of who you are or what political position you hold. The coming weeks and months will tell us whether this moment leads to actual jail time or whether the threats alone are enough to change behavior. Either way, something fundamental has shifted. The patience of the judiciary has run out. The era of tolerating courtroom chaos is over, and everyone involved in these cases, Trump, his attorneys, the prosecutors, the judges themselves, now has to navigate a landscape where the ultimate sanction is no longer theoretical. It's real, it's on the table, and it's coming for someone.